and I started reading this book called Pumpkin Plan. And one of the things that it tells me is that find out where your passion was. What was it that you enjoyed doing? Obviously. So when I did that, it just really started to flourish from there.
Welcome to the Michigan Real Estate Investor Network podcast, hashtag the network. This is episode 12, brought to you by Michigan Investment Title.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Michigan Real Estate Investor Network podcast, hashtag the network. My name is Blair Clark, and I am sitting here today with the CPA Frank Alcini, and then we have investor extraordinaire, Mr. Paul Beets, wow. And then the contractor special to my left, Mr. Shelby Hunter. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hello. How's it going?
We're doing good. We are doing good. So what I did is I asked everyone in the group if they had specific questions that they would like to ask each of you today. So we actually had some questions come in, and so that's what we're going to focus on today. So this is going to be kind of a Q&A. So we asked the group, what do you want to know? And the inquiring minds said the following. So I'm going to kick things off with Frank. Hi, Frank. How are you? And so one of the questions that was asked was a bit of an entry level question. The first one is about entities. So what would be the best entity for the three main types of real estate investing, in your opinion? And then lean right into the microphone.
Okay. So I get that one a lot from the tax standpoint. I hear it a lot from a legal standpoint. And I'm not an attorney. We have an attorney in the group, but really, it's a legal and a tax question, but also really depends on what the individual wants to do. So I think within our group, we have a lot of investors, flippers, wholesalers. We have people doing a lot of different things where really the best entity is going to really maximize the tax advantages while protecting yourself on the asset side without creating unnecessary work. Sometimes I hear some of the gurus say you need two LLCs and an S corp or some magic recipe. It's really dependent on everybody. And usually I like to sit down with an investor, see, are they married? Do they have kids? Do they have families? As they enter down the real estate realm, it really gets more complex. On a high level, a buy and hold type entity is going to be in an LLC generally for the best tax advantages. But then there's record keeping requirements. Then if it's a buy and hold single unit, you run into tenant issues in the courts where individually versus LLC. And it all depends how big you want to grow and how you want to complicate things. So with everything, there's not necessarily a cut and dry right and wrong. It's
a lot of variables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So more on the other side, depending on dollar amounts, if someone's a flipper or a wholesaler, maybe an S corporation makes more sense to reduce the self-employment tax and some strategies there. All depending on what type of dollars we're talking. If someone's going to make $20,000 or $300,000, it's going to make a difference. So it's a little more complex, and really, I think everyone at this table it would apply differently. But
yeah, probably. So the best answer is to just sit down, reach out to you, explain everyone's individual situation. Awesome. So another question that falls under that is a question about DBAs, doing business as. So if someone just decided to name their company, say they had an LLC and they just have like a generic LLC name, you know what I mean? Like Investor Network LLC. But then as they do things, they decide they want to dial it in and they just want to focus on one specific strategy. So then they want to just dub their company something like the Happy Wholesaler. How can they do that with a DBA rather than like take out another LLC?
So generally within the state of Michigan, they would have the opportunity to file for an assumed name and operate under that. Under that premise, they'd be able to have XYZ company, and then now they have their garage door division and maybe their window company. And many people are venturing into new territories where that DBA would help them just establish themselves. If it becomes a viable operation, it might be worth spinning that off or setting up a new company and structuring it. But if we're talking someone's going to do a small amount of revenue or start to grow it, that DBA might help them establish that name and see if there's really that presence. But it's really straightforward process, filing paperwork with the state so that you can operate that. Depending on localities, sometimes counties and situations have different situations, but with, let's say it's an LLC with a new DBA, it doesn't create a new tax entity. So you're still taxed under however you are. So if you're buying hold entity, you wanted to start wholesaling and flipping, it might be worth setting up a new entity as opposed to just mixing them all within that same business.
Gotcha. Awesome. Great answer. So Paul, word on the street is your beets are pretty dope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's what I've heard. That's what we've heard. And then also we've heard that you have a regular W-2 job.
Yes.
That is your bread and butter right now. And so one of the questions that came up was, since you have a job and it's just, perception, but it seems like it's a decent job. You had to go and you have to go to university for it to get
I
to
have
get
a
degree.
bachelor's and master's degree. Yep.
And you're an engineer?
I am
Is that
an
what it
engineer.
is? Okay. So in a lot of people's mind, they would think like, wow, you're an engineer. That's a really great job. What would cause you to then launch into real estate investing? So the question was, what was like the impetus? Like what was the inspiration, the starting point where you were just like, I don't actually want to do my engineering career till I retire. I want to get into real estate.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was really real estate that spawned this off initially, but I worked down in Georgia for Panasonic Automotive, and the automotive industry, especially engineering, is extremely challenging. It requires a lot of time, and I think down in Georgia, when my wife was in labor with my second child, my son, and I was over in the corner on a conference call with executives from Chrysler.
Okay.
And
I
got
would have
off-
been so mad at you, by the way.
I'm pretty sure she was not super thrilled with me as well.
Okay.
And she's nodding her head. But I got off that conference call and I kind of sat there and thought to myself, my daughter was 14 months old at the time. And I was thinking to myself, I've not really spent a lot of time with my daughter during those 14 months. Right. And I don't want that to be the same case for my son and for the rest of my daughter's life.
Yeah.
And so really for me, in my mind, that was the turning point where I was like, this is not going to work, right? This long term, this isn't going to work. And it wasn't until there's a long story of how I found real estate, but in my mind, I was thinking to myself, I need to find a different way forward. And so I ended up leaving Panasonic. We moved up here to Michigan. General Motors, I work for General Motors. They're a great company to work for. I have a lot better work-life balance in the job that I'm in, but it's still it's a lot of work. And so what I want to get to is I want to get passive income. It's going to allow me to spend a lot more time with my family, run my own business. There's a huge tax advantages. Frank will tell you that, the tax code is written for real estate investors. And I've heard oil men too, but, there's huge tax advantages to it. And, so it allows me to live the life that I want to live rather than, being tied down to, 3 or 4 weeks of vacation a year. My wife's a lot younger than I am. And so she wants to see a lot of the world. And the thing that's holding us back is my job and the capital to travel. So we want to have a chance to do that.
Yeah, that's like that was a really good visualization. Like I can see you in the hospital room on a conference call, just being like, what am I doing right now? Where are my priorities? I'm on a conference call and a child's about to come into the world. And I was just kidding, by the way, saying that I'd be mad at you. But no, I would have been.
She really was.
No, I totally would have been.
Happy.
But so did you get any like backlash when you decided, speaking to family members or things like that, or maybe even your parents, like when you said, I think I'm going to leave my really solid on paper, this was a really good, like the American way decision, and I'm going to go into something that a lot of people perceive to be unstable. That's what I've heard from a lot of people, is they still perceive the real estate market to be unstable. And I don't know if it's due to the crash that we had 10 years ago, or if it's just that's their mindset in general.
Yeah. So, most everybody that knows me very well knows that when I get something in my mind, I don't give up. I'm pretty stubborn from that perspective, but I'm also somewhat cautious when I say I rarely leap before I look. So I get
that vibe from you.
Yeah, I really dived deep into training and education to understand what I was getting myself into. But, I'm chasing after it hardcore. And I rarely allow people who are naysayers to corrupt my mind about things. And if they are really that loud, I just cut them out of my life. I mean, honestly, I just don't need the negativity in my life. I've decided to do this, and there's a good possibility that I'll fail along the way.
Sure.
And those naysayers, they're standing on the sidelines waiting for me to fail. And I just don't need them there. So actually, I've got a really good friend. He and I grew up together, and I'm fairly confident that he strongly disagrees with the way I manage my money and the investments that I'm making. And he and I don't speak. And it's sad. Yeah, well, but like I said, this is about me and my family, and my wife is very supportive, and she's actually very involved as well. I don't need the negativity in my life.
Yeah.
We've made a decision how we want to proceed, and all indications are, the people that I talk to. I have a great CPA that I work with. I've got a great team in Indianapolis that I work with. And I surround myself with, people. That's why I'm here, that are in the business. They understand the value of real estate, and they're encouraging on my path. And that's what I need. When I fail, I'm going to need, that support system.
Yeah, and I think that that's very important too. You've got to really protect your mindset when you're tackling something like that, something that's a little bit out of the norm. And as you get deeper into real estate investing, you realize how stable it really is and how normal it actually is. And then really anybody who is a homeowner is a real estate investor. You've invested in at least a property. Yeah. But I just think that's really, really important. And even if you don't have the ability to drastically cut somebody out of your life, just stop sharing your dream with them. Maybe just talk about something else, which is kind of a hard lesson that I had to learn at first. I just wanted to share this awesome idea with everybody, and I was just getting like hacked and slashed, and I just realized like I really don't need to be dependent on anybody else's validation other than maybe like my husband, you know what I mean? And my parents, so they're on board, and that's really like the only support team.
Yeah. The people's opinions that I really respect are the ones that are in the business. So if Tall Nate came to me and said, "Hey Paul, you really ought to look at this," I'm going to say, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, right? Yeah. But if I have somebody that comes to me and says, "You know what, this is what I've heard," and I know so and so that they got taken to the cleaners by tenants. Well, what real estate investing have you done, right? Yeah. So I really respect people that are in the business that are doing it, especially the ones that are killing it, like Tall Nate. Man, he's killing it, and I have a lot of respect for him. So. Those are the people that I want to surround myself with. And if he had a piece of advice and he said, "Hey, you really ought to look at this," or, watch out for this, that's worth gold to me. Yeah. You really got to ask yourself like the simple thing of who do you listen to? Yep. You know what I mean? And not necessarily just converse with, but like whose information are you actually absorbing, you know what I mean, into your own like practices and philosophies. And it's the people who are out there doing what it is that you aspire to do. But also, you got to look at like their background too. Like, did this person come from a similar place that I'm coming from? You know what I mean? If you aspire to be a millionaire
you want to follow the person who became a millionaire, doing the same things that you're aspiring to do, not somebody who's, maybe their parent handed them $1 million and now they're a millionaire, because you can't follow that path.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So that's good. That's solid. So Shelby, I want to ask you a similar question about like, how did you get started? So, I think you are the first contractor that we are interviewing. I think.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Welcome to the team.
I broke a record.
Yes, right on. So I personally know your story. So just full disclosure, Shelby's wife is my best friend, and I've known him for a long time.
No, she's my best friend. My best friend.
That's no. Well, I saw her first, which is the truth. But I just want to know, like, I just want to hear a brief. You have kind of a wild story as to how you got into demolition contracting for yourself. So if you can just kind of like pare that down and give us the Cliff Notes version of it. How did you get into demolition contracting for your own established business?
Wow. Okay. I guess I could start off with like where the passion really started to grow.
Okay.
So I worked for a company for about 5 years, and prior to, I had already done some construction and all this other stuff and whatever. But this company that I worked for about 5 years, phenomenal company. It was a great atmosphere that they had offered. It was an opportunity for me to further my understanding of how to be the type of person that they wanted me to be, and most importantly, it was based off family, and which is something that I really like honed in on. And so what happened was we would just literally go out and work. We would get there in the morning, and we would, have the game plan. This is where we're going, wherever it would be, whatever we had to do, everything that we needed. And it would be typically with a team of 4, or it could be 2, depending on the job and depending on the agenda that needed to happen. And so what happened was, working with these guys, it really allowed me to just work. I grew up in a lifestyle that I was just made to be a workhorse. And so being around these guys, man, just really, it started to build a fire for me to just like, man, I could see myself doing this, but not working for somebody.
Yeah.
This is like, I guess you could say, the birth of my entrepreneurial, path, as they were talking about the last show or whatever. That is something that I just really started to just pay attention to details with. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I began to learn, the work process, and then started to learn, pick up the little nuggets of how the business is running. And one of the things that I learned in that passion growth was communicating. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're communicating and you got the work aspects of it, this can go, sky's the limit. You know what I'm saying? And so I ended up going a different route, and I ended up working for the state of Michigan for a little bit of time. And after that, it just kind of went down spiral for me, because I had gotten into an accident.
What did you do for the state of Michigan?
I was a corrections officer for the state of Michigan. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed doing it because I'm aggressive. I have high head at times, but over the years I've calmed down. Uh-huh. But the thing that I loved about it, the training, it taught me how to be disciplined.
Yeah.
It taught me how to be structured, and it taught me how to feed that work mindset into a business. And so what happened at that point is I ended up getting into a bad car accident, which resulted in me having a dislocated hip, and my shattered socket, and my sciatic nerve got caught in between that, which resulted I had drop foot. Mm-hmm. So I ended up with 9 screws and 3 pins. And that just kind of took my physical abilities out of the game, because I wasn't able to do the type of work that I wanted to do at that point. And so everything shifted for me at that point. I came, I'm a very strong person in my faith, a full-time pastor, and have 4 children, beautiful wife, your best friend, strong support system. And it was just kind of direction, where am I going at this point? And so that's where the business perspective came in. And then I started reading this book called Pumpkin Plan. And one of the things that it tells me is that find out where your passion was. What was it that you enjoyed doing? obviously. So when I did that, it just really started to flourish from there. And so
Yeah.
and that's kind of I guess you could say the short side of it.
Yeah, that is a condensed version of it for sure. I think that's life-changing moments are really what kind of push you into doing, a life-changing thing. And I've read that book as well, The Pumpkin Plan. And so in my like just personal education, like post formal education, so going through school K-12 and then going into college, one of the things that I just recognized about education is it doesn't really give you like it doesn't give you real world application, and it doesn't really teach you how to just to be an entrepreneur. And I know that growing up, like entrepreneurship wasn't even a term that I even had like an awareness of. And just, I don't remember at any point in my K-12 education or university education, just ever like stopping and self-reflecting and asking myself, like, what are my strengths? What do I even like? Where am I even at? You know what I mean? Like in the world, what resources do I have? So, you really just have to like stop and ask yourself, what is it that I even like to do? And then how can I dial that in and like, leverage my own strengths? So yeah, that's just one of the things that you learn when you launch out and you become an entrepreneur for yourself, sure.
I think a lot of that's a good point. I mean, talking about college and everyone just says, here's the path you're supposed to go, and then you get a job and retire, and everybody's just kind of slowly dying in that mentality.
Yeah.
And I think sparking that vision and different things.
Yeah, it's definitely it is. It's a different path. I'm gonna keep saying that because what was his name? Dan. Him saying that really sparked something with that word path, and it's like it's a different path when you're walking down something without a ending process. You don't know how this is going to go, but whatever. I'm gonna take the chance. You know what I'm saying? Not many people do that because of the barriers that are in front of you with that. So I didn't care about school. I didn't do any of that stuff. I mean, I went to school for a period of time and played ball and all this other stuff, but that wasn't me. And so just years down, working, communication, building relationship, that's what's opening the door. So it's like, how do you do that?
Yeah. And like I said on the last show, that's what's so fantastic about this network is we're all kind of just, I don't want to use the word fumbling our way through this because that's not what we're doing at all. But like we're all figuring it out kind of like together. And so this is just a place where we can collectively come together. And there are people who are just on a plane like so much higher above than what we are. And then there are people who are like just getting into it. And then, I don't know about, Frank's level of experience, but I would say that the three of us, we're kind of like mid-tier, you know what I mean? We've got our hands dirty. We're in it. We're actually making things happen, but we, are not experts by any means. So we all have a lot to share. The love I've heard is what it is that we're supposed to share. But, yeah, and that's what's just so fantastic. And what was so great about people posting their questions into the group is that we can just all share our information. So one of the questions, Frank, back to you, that was asked, kind of these two questions kind of like blend together. What are the tax benefits? And again, I don't know if this is a question that's just dependent on someone's independent, individualized situation. But we got a question of what are the tax benefits to owning rental property? And then how does income from rental versus flipping differ?
Okay. So income from flipping is assuming somebody's active is going to be more of their normal business, something similar that you could go hire somebody to do similar to a job. And investing in rental activity is, as Paul mentioned, passive income. So if somebody, for instance, invests into a deal that you have, that's just going to be passive income or loss, and hopefully it cash flows and maybe kicks out some tax losses. But just being a passive investor, you're going to be limited to the passive rules, which effectively you won't get any tax benefit, but hopefully you can get positive cash flow and maybe net to zero on taxes.
Okay.
But now from a flipper standpoint, generally they're going to have ordinary income. And then that's where saying how they structure it, whether it's all subject to self-employment or subject to wages, there's some opportunities there. But now some of the tax advantages from a buy and hold standpoint, it really depends what someone's planning to do. If I'm going to buy and hold something and I'm selling it in 5 years and going to cash out, you're going to ultimately defer some of your gains. But I think is what people do. Some people get into this and maybe have some short-term sites. Next thing you know, they're good at it, buy another deal. Next thing you know, they own many deals. And then it really opens up, as Paul said, is once he quits his W-2 job, becomes a full-time real estate investor and what the IRS calls under Section 469 of the Internal Revenue Code. If you want to read it, it's real exciting. There's certain requirements, but once you meet those limits, you'd start to really open up being able to deduct those benefits against other income that you may have. And then really the longer term strategy is you can defer gains if you were to sell, let's say, 3 single family deals into 1 multifamily apartment. You can do a 1031 exchange. Then you could potentially exit out of that apartment deal into a commercial property and buy and hold and flip these properties and really never pay taxes until you cash out of the deal at the end. And I always hear people saying retiring, well, once I get into this passive income, you could potentially hold this real estate till the day you die and ultimately escape all the taxes. So that's really the beauty of those situations. And you don't have to hold that single family at XYZ township. It could be exchanged many times in other deals, or as you want to take on partners, there's ways to take on partners, maybe get some cash, and you can defer some of those taxes there as you decide, I want to scale back and retire and exit out of this deal. So there's a lot of tax advantages there. On the oil side, I'm not real familiar with that, but definitely on the real estate side. Right now, we have a real estate-friendly government in place, and some of the advantages were going to go away and then at the last minute slip back in. So I don't really see too much changing on the forefront. So,
how much time do you spend brushing up on all of this knowledge that you just regurgitated out to me? Like that just seemed, that's like, so my own personal question, if you are someone like me and you just want to do the work, and you can't possibly contain all of this stuff, in your own head, should we be reaching out to you prior to launching into something to see whether it works for us or not? Like for example, someone doesn't realize that if they buy and sell a house within a certain time frame, they're going to be penalized on it or something like that. You know what I mean? So instead of just launching out into anything, how often do people just call you before they even get into a deal to say, like, Frank, should I do A or should I do B?
I tried.
Red pill, blue pill.
More savvier clients, I guess, do. And a lot of times I heard this on Facebook or a friend told me that, really stay away from that. At least call me, take me out to lunch. We can sit and talk.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's somebody starting out, what do I do? If someone's buying one house, we can maybe talk a little bit. And do they need all this guidance? Not necessarily, but when they're 10 houses in, able to just pick up the phone, now I need to call or whatever that may be, or I'm looking at selling it, are they going to be able to exchange it? Because they can't just sell it and you have to use third-party companies and there's different rules, but knowing at least when to pick up the phone's the biggest thing versus coming to see me now and tell me everything you did last year. There's not really much that I can do at this point except balance some numbers. And that's kind of the boring part. Right now, I can work with you on 2019 and guide you or at least help you. And maybe that puts in your mind to call me in August when something happens. But
Yeah, because that seems to be the thing is, because like I shared with you when we were on the phone, one of my aunts is a CPA, and I just remember like a complaint being, people trying to like retroactively do things, and you can't. Like, you have to understand that like you need the advice up front before you do something, and like I can't actually go back and change the decisions that somebody had made, for someone who's disappointed that there were actually, that there weren't, that there were repercussions, I guess, as far as taxes go for the things that they do. And so that's just kind of like what's in my mind when I'm looking at doing something. It's just like, when I sit down with my accountant at the end of the year, is she going to be like, ooh, you really shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, I don't even know. I just was executing,
Oh yeah. And a lot of times I think people do, and throwing out that advice that you should have done it is still not necessarily critical, but I try to tell clients, because on the next one you have now call, we can't really do anything, but I know some other practitioners just punch the numbers in, send it out to you, and that's it. Where at least if I see some mistakes, I can guide you going forward and present those opportunities.
Yeah. Right on.
So I want to mention, you were referring to the real estate professional designation earlier. So in addition to that, for us W-2 guys, my wife manages several Airbnbs. And so she qualifies for the real estate professional designation. And so for W-2 folks that has, a spouse that is involved and qualifies for that, it's a huge tax benefit to be able to qualify that, because even though I don't qualify for it as a W-2, all of the investments that I'm doing and she's doing, there's huge tax benefits to that.
Yeah, so that's the perfect example of being able to. So if a wife qualifies as a real estate professional and they're filing jointly, they both technically qualify as real estate professionals, which then effectively you could have positive cash flowing real estate that, because of depreciation, is generating tax losses, that you can utilize those losses to offset other income, being W-2, interest, dividends, whatever that may be. And that'll provide you that immediate tax benefit. Right now, there is certain requirements, and there's certainly you have to hit 750 hours. Then there's grouping requirements, and it has to be your largest opportunity of service. So if you had a part-time position, let's say you worked 400 hours, but 750 was in real estate, you would generally qualify. If you have a husband and wife that are both full-time employees, now they need over 750, but assuming that the employee, they each work 2,080 hours annually, they would have to have 2,081 hours in the real estate, right, and good luck justifying that you work 4,000 hours a year. So it's just something to think of. I know some of the gurus and some of the financial gurus say you just check the box and you get this. There is still requirements you have to meet, and logbooks and record keeping requirements, but it does really present those real-time opportunities. And I think I see that with full-time investors really getting into opportunities there.
That was one of the questions. So I might as well just jump into that right now. Someone asked, what is it required to be considered a full-time investor? So like you said, there's a certain number of hours in order to be considered like the full-time investor. And that number was
750 hours in your real estate activities, and then
within a year.
During that year, yes. And then at the property level, generally somebody's not going to, even if you own 15 properties, have 750 hours per property. There's a further election that I would bet not everybody is actually effectively electing, where you can group the properties, and that's an election that generally needs to get included with the taxpayer's return. And then in the year that a new property is added, you have to further make that election to add property number 5 to the 4-property pool. So generally, I just include it with real estate professionals because there could be something, but that allows you to aggregate all your hours in one activity overall. So
Okay. I gotcha. All right. Well, Paul, one of the things that was asked of you is, so we noticed that you are trying to raise private capital for yourself. So in one of the videos that you had made, you were driving home, I think, from trying to network.
Always driving.
Yeah. you were networking with some private money lenders. Is that what it was? And so just, if you care to share, like, how's that going for you? What strategy do you use? What are the next steps you might take when someone tells you, sure, I'm interested? And then, how do you recuperate from someone telling you no?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that, again, most people that know me very well is failure is something. The way I look at failure is it's one of the best teachers. And so failure should be almost welcomed because you learn so much from that. As long as you have the right mindset that you've learned something from that. And so I've already gotten several no's. They weren't direct no's, but they were, indifference in the conversation. But what I've said is almost everybody that I've spoken to on my journey, they always knew somebody that was in real estate. And so I wrote down their names and I followed up with them. And so, it's spanning out those leads that I might end up running into somebody through my network of that I never knew, but maybe they'd be willing to partner with me on a deal. So I would say it's going very well. Most of the podcasts and everything that I listen to, their first advice is, and they show this concentric circle, right? They start with your immediate friends and family, right? Uh-huh. And I think I've probably tapped them out as well as I can. My mom did partner with me on one of my deals. But then going next to that is, make a list of all of the people that that have money, whether they run their own business or they're executives or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the good news is throughout my career, I've had the benefit of working very closely with executives in a lot of different companies. And so literally I just opened up a spreadsheet and I went through my LinkedIn, I'm connected to 500 some odd people, and just started jotting down names, where they live, and I grouped them. My first stop was Indianapolis. My second stop was Detroit. And then I sorted them, ranked them, people that knew me really well and I knew them. I had a rapport with them, and they were the first ones for me to talk to. And so I'm just working through that network. Mm-hmm. The other strategy that I've been taking that has actually really paid off well, and I heard this on a podcast, the Bigger Pockets podcast, is thinking about branding. And I know you had posted a number of things about branding is, if you go to just anybody and you say, Frank, what are the top 2 brands of toothpaste, right? What would you say?
Crest and Colgate.
Yeah. So
that's what I
I did the same exact, and he and I didn't train, so we didn't figure that out up front, but I did the same thing to my wife, and she said the same thing. And even on the Bigger Pockets podcast, mm-hmm. they did the same thing.
They said Crest and Colgate. That's right? What popped into my head.
Exactly. Yeah. And so isn't that amazing? And you think about, tissue paper, Kleenex, right? Most people even call them Kleenexes, right?
Nobody says, hand me a facial tissue,
right,
or give me a cotton swab. It's Q-tip or Kleenex.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I don't even think about that. Q-tip is a brand, and some people may not even realize that. So what the message that they gave on this podcast was, you want to be the Crest and or Colgate of private lending. Mm-hmm. Is, when you're out on the road and somebody runs into somebody that's, oh man, I just need a place to put my money that's going to give me a better return than one. You know what? Paul is always asking about private lending, right? Uh-huh. So you want to be that person that, he's going to help you. He'll be able to help you. And what that really takes is that you got to talk about it. Yep. You got to be on the road, and so my wife and I, we go see a chiropractor in Utica, and we talk about real estate, right? Just very casually. This is what we're doing. She's killing an Airbnb. We've got rentals in Indianapolis. And one day he said, and this was not even on purpose, right? I didn't even, there was no pressure whatsoever. Dude, I'm really hot. This microphone is really hot. Okay. Let's step back a little bit. But we just talk about it very, very casually. And he said, he pulled me aside after our session and he said, hey, you guys talk about real estate. You're on this podcast. When it goes live, let me know. I'm interested in real estate. I said, really? You're interested in real estate? And I said, well, why don't we have lunch and just talk about what your goals are? What kinds of things are you interested in doing? And so I bought him lunch just the other day. It was last week. And I said, hey, look, I want to be a helper. This is Jeff Shipp talking. I want to be a helper, right? So if you want help buying houses, man, I got contacts. I specialize in the Indianapolis market. I've got contacts, a really tall, guy that has a lot of units. He could, so I know people in the Detroit metro area, and I know people in Indianapolis, so I can help you in those areas. And I said, but there's another way that I could help you, depending on what level of involvement that you want. I said, you could partner with me on deals. I'll do all the work. I'll manage the property management. I'll manage the contractors, and we'll give you, a great return on your money. And he's like, yeah, I like that a lot better. I'm a doctor. He's like, I don't have time for silliness, right? I said, well, I really don't either, but I tolerate it, right?
Yeah.
And so he's going to probably be one of my best leads yet. And he's enthusiastic about it. He mentioned that because he runs his own business, his own practice, that he doesn't have a lot of investing opportunities. General Motors, they match my 401k contributions. He doesn't get any matching, right? And so he's really looking for something to grow wealth quickly. And then I started sending him deals. This was advice from Dylan, just very casually send him deals. This is what I'm thinking. Let me know what you think. And he responds back, I've got a buddy that is interested, and I've got a number of different chiropractor friends that are in the same situation I am, and I'm confident that they're going to be interested as well.
Talk about niching it down, like your pool of money is chiropractic.
I mean, I think the goal is to try to break into a number of those, right? And it's networking. It's all about networking and building rapport and being authentic. And so I'm excited. I'm really, really excited. I told my wife, I said, this could break the whole thing wide open.
Yeah.
Right.
And you never know.
If he's looking for longer term investment, he could even do a qualified plan into like a self-directed IRA and then loan you the money.
Yeah, actually, Frank, I told him, I said, because he's getting ready, I think he's buying his practice and the building that they're in. And I said, you really ought to talk to a real estate CPA about that, because, and I wanted to talk to you on the side about this, is, if he has an LLC, a separate business that owns the building, and he rents that to a business that, isn't there some tax benefits there, the way that he structures the deal, right?
In that case, there is, but then you run into the self-rental rules. So an owner-occupied business, it's still a way to separate things. It's just not considered passive.
I see. Yeah.
For instance, but there are other advantages, but he wouldn't necessarily be able to have profit there to be absorbed by passive investments in single family.
So my advice to him was, I know real estate attorneys here. They're going to be able to draft the mortgage, draft the promissory note. This is, a very safe investment. And then, I said, we could get you hooked up with a really great real estate CPA, part of our network. And, so that's my goal, is to build up a number of these different avenues. Yeah. And, so far, I think we're well on our way. I'm very, very excited. And, it gives me hope for an early retirement.
Yeah, and that's just another testament, to the network. This network it is a network, because you don't you have all of these resources in your back pocket. You know what I mean? You can say, you know, I personally know and do business with these people who can, you know, come in and draft the legalities and just make this, you know, completely, you know, just completely solid and legit. And there's just no reservations in that. And so that's really valuable as well. But yeah, I've got a chiropractor. I wonder what he's got going on, because I'm looking for private money too.
I hope it's not the same one.
Maybe.
But then abundance mentality, right? You know, I was telling my wife we're part of a Facebook group, and this Facebook group they have home equity lines of credit in a first lien position. They refinance their homes in the first lien position, and they pay them down dramatically, very, very quickly. And I told her, I said, you know, I'm going to start networking in this group. All these people, they have huge balances of equity on their homes, and they're looking to, you know, invest that in some way. That's how I got into real estate. And so I think it was last night I was on the phone with a lady, and I said, again, no pressure. I'm here to help, right? And find a way for her to meet her goals and for me to meet mine.
I think that's really the attitude you got to take with anything that you're doing in real estate investing. Is it's like, it's cool if it works and it's cool if it's not, and you just don't put all of your, you know what I mean, all of your hope into one basket, and then you also just don't let, you know what I mean, any sort of like anxiety or expectation that you have kind of like shine to the surface. So just speaking of like, you know, expectation and anxiety leading into you, Shelby. So I know that like as a contractor, when you work with people, property owners, whether they're investors or just, you know, the general homeowner, they have certain expectation from you. So like, can you share with us, like, when you get called to look at a property, what are some things that you need from the property owner that would just make your life and your working relationship with them just so much smoother? Like, you know, for example, like, does a property owner need to really like prep anything before they come in, or do they need to give you any sort of notice of X, Y, and Z that might be going on in the situation?
So, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think the biggest thing in that area is, like I was saying before, is communication. So on a day-to-day basis, typically when I go into a property and, you know, investor or someone who wants, you know, some work done, a lot of the times what I'm doing is listening and taking notes down. And what are your expectations? What's the timeline that I'm looking at? More so kind of trying to see their vision and where I could be an asset to their vision, to their result. You see what I'm saying? And so what that does for me is I'm not even really talking half the time, because they're so you know, rapidly thinking, or they have these random thoughts of what if we do this and what if we do that. And so it's just a matter of me taking a pen and a notepad, having a tape measure, and okay, here you go. This is what can be said. This is what you can do. And then, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, if I can't do it as a contractor, who can I reach out to do it?
Okay,
and
cool. That's
where the relationship comes in with people that you build up in your community or whatever the case may be. But I think the main thing is just that you're just you're constantly communicating with that person. And then the other thing that I see coming into it is that as you start working, that you're letting the investor know day-to-day process of where you are. Let's be honest, investors put a lot of money into projects. They invest a lot of time into it. Some of them are like, this is all I got, so I need to make sure that this is going and this is happening, or whatever the case is. And I've seen that over the encounters that I've had with people, the stress level that they have. So my job as a contractor is, let me come in and help you. You know, how can I do that? Well, listen, suggest certain things that might not work out for you because this is this, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But it's just boiling back down to the communication. So as long as you got that as a contractor for you know, I can't speak for every contractor, but for me running the business, I have to make sure that I'm listening to them and communicating to them very firmly and with the hopes to, you know, meet their expectation. So.
Is there anything that comes to mind? Like, do you maybe see like a pattern when you go into things. Is there any information that you just wish that like a homeowner or property owner would give you beforehand, or understand that it's important? Like, have you seen like over and over again, you know what I mean? Like, because I have no idea, like, do they need to turn off the electricity or anything like that, you know, or just, you know, whatever. Is there a common thing where you're just like, you know what, if property owners just knew to do this, life would be easier for both parties?
So, okay, that's not a good question. So this is what I've done over the years of doing work. And I don't know if some of you all are probably in the GM, there's an apprentice mindset that I have. So whenever you start a job, typically in the different trades, you are an apprentice for a period of time. Mm-hmm. Okay. So one of the things as an apprentice, you have to think ahead of what your mechanic is doing. So let's take, for example, as a carpenter, which is something that I do on the side as well. But me understanding the knowledge of what my, master carpenter is doing, I have to be able to think what his next move is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? And so what I've learned is over the years is that if I have this mindset, not just for my application, but delivering that same understanding to the person who wants the results done, then it makes the process a lot less stressful. So, So in the contractors world, every trade should have a respect for each other. So if I'm a demolition guy, I'm already thinking, okay, I got a plumber's going to come in here. I have an electrician's going to come in here. I have an HVAC guy's going to come. What do they need? Okay. So what can I do to make sure that when they come in, everything is said and done? Don't cut the wires. Please don't cut the wires. Get in contact with the contractor or with the person doing that, making sure that, hey, look, we're going to come in and demo this wall, and there's going to be, outlets and stuff. So is it cool with you or not? Making sure that communication is in play with the investor. Really, just what's your vision? If you want to, if they want to help, if they want to, cut time down, sure, yeah, cut the power off, make sure the water is cut off, because typically with the demolition crew that I come in with, we're working very fast because the investor has a timeline, or the other contractors have timelines that I can't express enough that the time management aspect of it is very, very important.
Absolutely.
And if you're not, on that timeline, somebody lost the money. And in this world, losing money is not a good thing.
Right.
So you got to make sure that communication is there, where you are timely in a timely fashion. So that's typically how I think going into it, from not a master carpenter or whatever the case is, but just I'm an apprentice. So let me think 2 moves ahead.
Yeah, like a bit of a chess game. And
exactly.
Communication is just in this day and age kind of a bit of a lost art. Yeah. Anyway, and so it's this weird thing. It's like people don't want to communicate, but then they become frustrated due to the lack of communication that they, played a role in as well.
I'm sorry. It's funny that you say that, because as you say that, I get locked back into like football, because I played football all my life. But if we all would come to an understanding that teamwork makes a dream work. I know
so
we
cliche.
hear that 1,001 times, right? But it actually makes sense. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, growing up in the football life, and even doing what I did before or whatever, there was always the same thing, that if we can just come together for a common good, then we can get bigger results. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so you saying that is just like, yeah, let's just talk about this. How can we work this out? Who's strong and who's weak, and where we can help out at. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And so I know that working with contractors in the past, it can be a frustration, or it can just be a beautiful relationship. You know what I mean? And so just getting your perspective, since you are on the other side as the contractor, you know what I mean? What is it that we can do, you know what I mean, just to make your life easier? Keep smiling, bring work. You're right. Yeah. So Frank, back to you. One of the questions that we had from Mr. T.O. Bogdan, who is gallivanting through the land of Germany. He spends a lot of time, or so he says, I'm just kidding, T.O., in personal and professional development. So he wants to know if he goes to anything related to real estate investment, if he's attending conferences, going to seminars or masterminds, even if he spends money purchasing books or downloading audios that he's listening to feed his professional development. Is that tax deductible? And if so, what should he do to get those deductions?
So being that it's real estate related, I would say generally it's going to be, it's the type of thing that I believe he has rental properties or management, and that would be, so that doesn't mean that somebody with no rentals and nothing to do, just professional development type book. So I wouldn't really call it necessarily that or personal development. It's really that education of, no different than me going to tax updates, accounting updates, different updates that I go to.
What title would you give it?
It's really continuing education, more along that lines, and all the associated travel with it. There, under travel, there is certain rules. You can't go 2 weeks down to Florida and go to a seminar for one day and say it's all travel. There is certain rules and requirements as you get into there. But if you go to a $5,000 seminar, it's going to be generally...
So if you go to an out-of-state seminar for 3 nights and you spend 3 nights in a hotel, you should write that
and
off.
It's a 3-night seminar, yes.
Okay.
Generally, it's going to fall under there.
Okay.
So.
Oh, very cool.
And then your travel days are going to qualify as work travel days. And again, that all falls back into keeping logs of where you're going. And as you're keeping your logs, keeping your receipts, and doing your accounting, it'll all come together. It's the ones a year from now, how do I put it all together, and where do I go? So
You've been listening to the Michigan Real Estate Investor Network podcast. We just call it the network. To subscribe to the show, go to www.michiganreinetwork.com, where you can have the show sent right to your inbox. Subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. If you'd like to be on a future show, there's a link on the site to submit your info. The network is 100% focused on the Michigan real estate investing community. Whether you're brand new or a grizzled vet, we want you to be a part and share the love.